Unique people leading unique lives shape and inform Iowa City. This community is enhanced by these women and men who live in our midst, working, teaching, creating. Welcome to a series of conversations with people who have stories to tell. Join my guests and me, Ellen Buchanan, in a series of interviews called One of a Kind. My guest on One of a Kind is Joan Cook, the former director of the Retired and Senior Volunteer Program known as RSVP. For 29 years, retiring in the summer of 2014, Joan recruited more than 1,000 volunteers for RSVP. This very, very successful program places seniors serving as tutors and mentors for the Rock and Read program, Pen Pals, Speak Up, Southeast Junior High Tutoring, volunteers for Meals on Wheels, medical transportation, and volunteer patients for the College of Nursing and Medicine. These helpers volunteer in the following counties: Johnson, Iowa, Des Moines, Muscatine. This program, according to Joan Cook, quote, serves an entire population of youth and adults. It integrates diverse backgrounds and cultures, ages and experiences, and blends them in a positive way for both the giver and the receiver, end quote. Joan and her husband, Tom Cook, raised 2 children in Iowa City, Jennifer and Jonathan, and they have 3 grandchildren, Emily, Andrew, and Rachel. Welcome to One of a Kind.
Thank you.
Your story, I know, begins in Kentucky, in Fort Thomas, when you were born in 1947. Tell us a bit about your first family and their influence on you.
Oh, I was one of 3 children. I was the oldest, and we lived in a small home in Fort Thomas, Kentucky. My mother was a teacher at a Catholic intercity school. Mm-hmm. And so she was a teacher in the times when you didn't have to be accredited, just because she loved working with children. So she was a very spiritual, giving person, and really accentuated the positive things of troubled kids. Mm. And then my father was a credit manager and lived to be 94. Mm. Loved exercise, loved people, loved playing cards, and
well, now we know where you, the apple doesn't fall too far from the tree. So what did you take in college? You went to a small Catholic college,
I
St.
did.
Thomas?
Yeah, Thomas More College
Mm-hmm.
in Northern Kentucky, and I was an English major. And then after we moved here in 1981, I got an Aging Studies certificate at the University of Iowa in Aging Studies because I wanted to work with older adults.
But back up a little, how did you meet your husband, Tom?
And I met Tom in college.
Mm-hmm.
And
then you moved to Durham, so he
yes.
got a degree in physical
yes.
therapy.
He went to the Vietnam War. We moved to Kansas and then back home when Jen was born. And then he got a physical therapy degree at Duke in
Mm-hmm.
North Carolina. Then we moved to Philadelphia for 8 years, and he worked at Moss Rehab up in Philadelphia. And then he was recruited to teach at the University of Iowa in the physical therapy department in 1981.
So you came in 81.
Mm-hmm.
It didn't take you too long to get involved in the community, did it? When did you decide you wanted to, after you took this aging program at Iowa, is that what you were looking around to kind of find a job that fit working with elderly people? And
well, that's a good question. At first, I was just I stayed home and helped the kids acclimate to moving again. Jen was going into 6th grade and John into 2nd. So I worked at Lucas School as an associate, and I did a few other jobs. And then I wanted to go back to school, and Tom says, "Well, who do you enjoy being around?" And I said, I like older adults. And there was an aging studies program here at the University of Iowa, and I just thoroughly enjoyed that. And so people asked me if I was going to be working in a nursing home. because they knew I was taking aging studies. And that was the vision. That's really kind of what started me in breaking stereotypes, in the philosophy of breaking stereotypes with older adults. No, I don't want to work in a nursing home necessarily. I want to mobilize people and feel successful in their lives and connect them with purpose in their lives. At the time, I didn't realize all those words, but people have a lot to give no matter what their age is. And so I started as a practicum in 1985. I worked with Elder Services when they were a small little agency in the senior center, located in the senior center. Since then, they've moved several times, and I was part of their agency. But it was mobilizing older adults to find purpose and enjoy connecting with community needs.
You had but to back up a little, you had a surrogate grandmother, didn't you? Did she have an influence on you in this area? And who was she?
A surrogate here?
Was it here or was it in Kentucky?
Well, there were a couple. We met a first-generation Italian lady in Philadelphia, and she was kind of our son's little grandmother. Yes, and she was from Sicily in Italy, so we learned an awful lot about first-generation Italian people. And then here, I think it's like a surrogate mom. Carol Macon is one who was actually one of my initial volunteers and has followed through the 29 years that I've been a director, and she has been a volunteer all through that. So she's of the next generation. So.
And this RSVP, were you the first director?
I was.
And it started in 1990?
It started in 1990.
1990.
There were state funds available through the Corporation of National Service, and RSVP was started in 1990 here and in Fort Dodge. It's a national program under the Corporation for National and Community Service, and it's under the Senior Corps, which is a sister program of AmeriCorps Vista. So there's federal funding, state funding, and regulations. Lots of regulations. And so we followed those regulations all along and just grew and grew and grew in capacity.
So for the viewers who might want to get involved, talk about the RSVP programs and explain each one of them. One that I didn't know about was Speak Up, but you have pen pals and you've got Rock and Read. And so explain kind of that, because maybe a listener would say, yes, I want to do that.
Okay, well, if you're an RSVP volunteer over 55, you can serve older adults, you can serve children, and you can serve the community. It's all included. And the mixing the generations is really an important factor in that. Serving children, you can be a pen pal, writing back and forth to second graders at Horn. We're just finishing up. I'm helping my successor, and we're working together a little bit.
So children in second grade at
Ernest
Horn say, oh, I'd like a pen pal. And
well,
then you
all of the second graders are doing that. We're finding the seniors for them to write to. It's a class project.
At Horn or throughout the school system?
Right now it's just at Horn. Because there's about 70 of them all together. So that's how it started with Glenda Argenbright. She just retired last year too, or this year. And it was a service learning project. Pat Schnack's and Glenda Argenbright's projects were both service learning, which was a funneling stream of funding through the corporation as well. The goal was to connect with the community and to have a reciprocal relationship with different populations within the community.
Do the pen pals ever get to meet?
Yes, the pen pals meet twice a year, and they go in for a whole morning. They listen to the children read, they listen to them sing, they do a project, and they share a topic. And the topics are very, very incredibly enriching. They talk about the schools we went to, the clothes we wore, toys we played with, games we played with, transportation. I mean, just to audio tape that would have been just wonderful, because there's such a change in the generations. So the children get to listen to all the changes that have happened, and the seniors share their topics. And the other seniors really have some real interesting
Great.
things to add and enjoy each other's comments.
So
and they do
there's-
that twice a year.
Sure. They're so pen pals. Now what about Rock and Read?
Rock and Read was started here in 1991, and that is a program that is now on almost all the elementary schools, including Clear Creek and West Liberty, which is our satellite areas. And that's reading with 1 or 2 children over the span of 30 to 45 minutes.
They read to you or you read to them or both?
It depends on the child. A lot of them are connected with kindergartners, and you are flexible depending on the teacher's guidance. So that some kindergartners can read, but other ones are read to. And the whole purpose is to develop the love of reading, because in this day of technology, reading a book, writing a letter is almost antiquated.
Exactly.
So developing the love of reading. Denise Remke yesterday just said that they're M&Ms, they're mentors and models. They model enjoyment and the thrill of a book, and then they're modeling that for the child.
Great. Okay, the other, okay, Speak Up. Tell me about that
Speak
program.
Up was, we started Speak Up in 1997. It was originated in an RSVP in Des Moines, and it helps children in 5th grade develop speaking skills. So for an 8-week session, they learned about speeches, they learned about public speaking and how to overcome nervousness. The next 5 weeks, they take turns giving a 3-minute speech. And public speaking is about 30% of the population would rather die than give a speech. So it develops a lot of self-esteem and a lot of confidence.
So what does the adult, the volunteer, what do they do for this?
The volunteers form teams, and there are manuals, and we go over the manuals, and it's a training process, and then they work one-on-one with the students and help them, sit with them and help them develop their speech. So it's a whole brainstorming session first, and then they develop, and mostly it's what they're familiar with. We hear a lot about football and sports and families and vacations, things that they're familiar with.
And now Southeast Junior High tutoring, that's?
Southeast Junior High, Joe McClure is the teacher. She read an article in the paper about Rock and Read in one spring, and she says, I think I could use those volunteers for my students who are reading far below grade level. So for about 15 years now, we've been sending volunteers. There are 31 volunteers. Last year gave 2,000 hours for about 25 students.
So they go and sit, and the student can read aloud.
Work with reading, work with math. This year it's changed a little bit. They're doing homework skills, math, reading, maybe global studies, homework, whatever they need to have done. And it's a small class of about 4 or 5, but they need one-on-one.
Sure.
And it's done a lot. Last year when we had the system, it elevated their reading levels about 3.5 grade levels in a year when she was actually teaching a class. So it's an amazing one-on-one.
So then there's Meals on Wheels didn't used to be under RSVP,
Well,
did it? Or was-
RSVP Elder Services is the sponsor, and RSVP is one of the programs under Elder Services. So we do a whole range of recruiting volunteers to serve older people, to serve children, to serve the community. One of our earliest ones was the police department. We've had people working down in the data records program and the courthouse. We have guides there. But Meals on Wheels is huge, and it's getting bigger, and it's a big need. So volunteers, if they want to drive a route, can be a Meals on Wheels volunteer.
And it's a wonderful, you get to know, I delivered on Monday mornings for about 10 years, and you know, some people wanted to chat, some people were really hungry, but it was so worthwhile
Rewarding.
doing. Yeah.
That's right. You get to know a wonderful group of people.
And then I think it must be kind of fun to be a patient, quote, and help out with, talk about that part, about medical students and showing up to be a pretend patient.
So the volunteer patient is a program through the University of Iowa College of Medicine, and last about 3 years ago, the College of Nursing wanted the same program because they heard how wonderful it was. And it was originated for individuals to share their own history and medical history and background. So their medications, the doctors, the students, when they become doctors, have a hard time translating from the book to the people, and they're very nervous. And so our nursing students, of course, they're young, and so they do the blood pressure and take your temperature and do all the things a physician does and get feedback from the patient who are the volunteer patients. Yeah, and that's really gone. I think they might have originated it, or they were one of the first ones that did it, and now it's just very, very popular throughout the country.
So in a year, how many people are volunteering for RSVP? About how many volunteers do you have? We had
600 or 700 volunteers. And another thing that started a couple years ago that I'm very proud of was the medical transportation. That is a program that we had that going in the 3 other counties, and we started it in Johnson County, getting people to medical appointments who can't drive any longer. Because you lose your ability to drive, you can outlive it by 8 to 10 years. So that's another program that's really been very rewarding. People can take them to medical appointments.
But for both Mercy and University Hospitals?
For anybody. There could be 70 different locations that you might, therapy.
In these counties, in the 5 counties I mentioned?
Yes.
How big is your staff?
I was doing it.
You were doing, oh my goodness.
Yes, well, I wasn't doing the Meals on Wheels altogether. I was recruiting the volunteers and interviewing them and then placing them into the areas where they're volunteering. So I didn't have direct supervision under those categories. But I did need to keep in touch with them and make sure that everything was going well. We had to document what they were doing, the outcomes of what they were doing, which is a requirement from the federal government. So we had to do surveys
of
all the participants. Yes. But they were wonderful comments, amazing comments, 98, 97% approval. So it was very satisfying.
And is RSVP listed in the phone book if people want to call and?
Yeah, it might be. It's under elder services.
Okay,
yeah.
Got to keep remembering that. It's under elder services.
Yeah.
Okay.
And there's 22, 24 RSVPs in Iowa and about 700 in the country.
I always ask my guests who or what has had a major influence on you. Who has influenced you?
Well, I'd say a lot of people.
And?
And my father, we talked about, he was very positive, liked to exercise, liked meeting people, didn't know an enemy. And my husband's had my family's had a strong influence. Tom,
in what way?
Tom has, we've been traveling to places which are off the beaten track for the most part. We lived in Slovakia in 2000. We lived there when people didn't speak English, and it was kind of a foreign country at the time.
Sure.
Right now it's in the EU and everybody speaks English, and it's not a challenge anymore, but then it was really enjoyable and fun and challenging. And so we've traveled quite a bit in his passion for helping people around the world from one thing to another. And he and my daughter have always done slideshows for our parties and recognitions for RSVP, and have really helped support me through my passion as well.
Great. So you have 2 children, and tell me where they are and what they're about, and 3 grandchildren.
Jennifer's in Iowa City. She was in film for 8 years, worked in film, about 10 major films, and then came back and got her public health master's. And
she's in public health like Tom.
Yes, she is.
Your husband.
So she's working at the University of Iowa with families with mental illness, and they're doing research and then rolling out information and areas where people can improve and have support groups. And then our son is in Michigan, and he's a prosthetist and orthotist and has the 3 grandchildren. And he went to the University of Iowa as well, both of them did. And so we try to get up there as often as we can. He loves sports and was a soccer player, and Andrew's a soccer player now. So
are you traveling? Are you
fun.
looking forward to traveling more abroad to kind of exotic or unusual places?
Well, we've been to a lot of them. I think we're going to Brazil next year with a Rotary. So, but we're looking into some other areas. Biking is a passion of ours, and we enjoy doing that.
Tell people. It sounded like you were working a lot, and here you were raising children. But when you had some free time, what did you love doing? Biking, you said, and traveling.
We like dancing, biking, photography. I've taken a lot of pictures of my volunteers and of the families. And so, yeah, biking, we biked in Ireland and we biked in PEI with friends. So that's always fun because you're in nature and enjoying being outside as well as getting exercise.
Have you done Ragbri yet?
A couple days.
Okay, I know. It's always at that hot time of the year.
Yeah, we like biking. We do an 11-mile to Terry Trueblood Park for exercise in about an hour from where we live.
Great.
So, and bike with friends.
I read in the research, Joan, that you read a book that had quite an impact on you. Was about the emotional terrain of elders. Tell me about this book.
Mary Pfeiffer, Navigating the Emotional Terrain of Our Elders, is one of my books that I've looked at and read and used in speeches and used in quotes. To be rooted is the greatest need and least recognized need of the human soul. That really resonated with me because when I talked to Pat Snack, for instance, she talked all the time about kids not eating together with their families, not having a senior, not having a model in their lives, and that's one of her motivations for Partners in Reading when she did it, with connecting the senior and the student to read a book and to share their lives in the book. And society is just kind of broken down as far as having families around. Our family is in Michigan, so you don't have really direct contact on a weekly, daily basis, except maybe on the phone. So to be needed is one of the critical needs of seniors in our community. And so I think the purpose in life that people find, and then when they're connected with intergenerational activities, it just opens up a whole new world for them. And a lot of them love that because they're removed from their children or grandchildren. So I think Mary Pfeiffer was just wonderful. She talks in detail about rebuilding communities and figuring out how to do that on a societal level.
Have you ever met her?
Yes, she was here.
Oh, she was.
Mike Lensing brought her here as a guest speaker back in 2007, I think it was. So I did meet her and actually wrote to her, and I sent her my newsletters, and she wrote back to me because I was just so enthralled with her mission because I shared it.
Sure. Well, I want to know what you're looking forward to now that you are retired in 2014. What's more travel?
Well, I'm enjoying the space and time to think, and my educators are the retired volunteers that I've interviewed over time, and I see a lot of them. I'm learning bridge, and so that's something I've always wanted to do with the people that I want to reconnect with, and a lot of those are the volunteers that I've gotten to know over years. So, and exercise and water aerobics and volunteering back at Joe's class, and I'm going to be a pen
starting
pal.
to volunteer.
Yeah, in my program, and I'm actually helping to keep the program and to take the best parts of the program and to keep doing what I love to do.
Well, I think Iowa Cityans and the people here and the young people and the old say thank you very much for all that you've done. And my last question is, what do you love best about living in Iowa City? Do you have something, the favorite thing about living in this community?
Well, I think it's just so rich with literacy and writing and reading and theater and activities, and everybody's just so energetic. We've gotten to love Iowa City. It's small, but it's still, it's rich with the people. I met you.
Oh, thank you. And I'm glad you left Kentucky and you made Iowa City your home. Thank you for being a guest, Joan.
Thank you, Ellen.
My guest on One of a Kind has been Joan Cook, wife, mother, grandmother, and retired director of RSVP, an acronym for Retired and Senior Volunteer Program. This program is funded by the state and seeks to find volunteer positions for retired people, often working with kids. As Joan states, quote, volunteers make the world go round, and volunteering is good for one's health, end quote. Words used to describe Joan are positive, committed, non-judgmental, sees the good in everyone, and a very hard worker. Joan Cook is one of a kind.